Good morning, class. Good evening. Good afternoon. It depends on what time are you seeing or watching this recorded lecture for today. I just want to greet you I just want to know, and at the same time, I hope that you are safe from and free from COVID-19 and from any other accidents or incidents, that is going on around you, around the environment that you are in at the moment. And I also hope that you're in a positive vibe as you watch and view our recorded lecture. Before we start, let me just share my screen. Yan. Yan. Okay. Once again, I am your professor from Communication Media Laws and Ethics, Jerry Luis Urbana. And the last meeting, we were able to discuss about freedom of the press. Freedom of the press and the freedom of expression. At the same time, I was able to give an overview about the sources of media laws in the Philippines and sources of media laws of the foreign countries. For that was our lesson one, by the way. And for those of you na wala pa ka-submit sa ilahang case digest, please do so because we will be having another set of cases for you to digest for this week. So our lesson 2 class is about the Philippine constitutions and branches of government. I will give you a very quick overview before we proceed with other media law topics for you to be able to have a grasp, of what the constitution says, and at the same time what are the branches present, sorry, the branches present in our own national government. But before I proceed, let me just emphasize that you can comment down below, if you have questions, clarifications, or violent reactions. You can comment them down below. If asan ako na siya i-post, whether sa Facebook ba or sa atong YouTube account. But you can also message me as long as dili na sa lampas work hours. So, wala na akong dudugay magid ko nagatulog because I also have to read my readings sa law school, and I have also other work, full-time work aside from the work that I have here in Davao del Sur State College. So please bear with me. For our lesson 2, once again, this is about the our own constitution, the 1987 Constitution and the branches of government. We will tackle each of 4 main constitutions along with the current organization of power among the 3 branches of the government in the Philippines. Now, what are the 3 branches of the Philippine government? What are those? Of course, it is elementary. Whether or not you're a law student, I hope na hinaot ko na unta ka balota. What are the 3 branches of government? 3 lang ba ang branches? Kung recitation pa niya, I'm going to ask you, I'm going to confuse you if whether or not there are only 3 branches of the government, diba? That's what our professors do in law school. Ma-confuse pa ka if 3 branches lang banggid ba. 3 branches lang po, ladies and gentlemen. It's the executive branch of the government, executive department, the legislative department, and the judicial branch of the government, which we will be discussing in the next succeeding slides. Sorry. Okay, let's transfer it para makita. So what is a constitution? What is a constitution, and what is its important? Why is it important for a country or for a state to have a constitution? A constitution class is primarily a set of rules and principles specifying how a country should be governed, how power is distributed and controlled, and what rights citizens possess. As of the moment, we have our latest constitution. It was drafted after the People Power Revolution during the term of President Cory Aquino. 1987 Constitution, it is usually written down and contained with a single document. And a constitution begins with what? It begins with preamble, no? Sa ato sa una ginapamemorize ta sa preamble during our elementary or high school years siguro, kahit karon memorize pa nako siya. Even if eyes closed, I can still recite it because we were able to have recitations then way back during our media law na years, college years, at the same time sa law school din. It begins with the preamble. Preamble, by the way, it is a short statement that states the purpose of which is to neatly summarize and crystallize the values and principles a nation hopes to embody and wishes to project to the rest of the world. They are aspirational, often quite vague statements intended to inspire citizens and shape a positive national identity and political culture. It isn't necessarily uh, part of I mean, it is not binding as to the rule of law here in our state, but it is part of the Constitution, and it is a short statement, no, attached to our 1987 Constitution. Next, Malolos Constitution. Malolos Constitution, by the way, okay, next slide. This is the Constitution of the First Philippine Republic of 1899, or Malolos Constitution of 1898. It grew out of revolution against Spain and its subsequent triumph. It is approved by Malolos Congress November 1898 and promulgated by President Emilio Aguinaldo on January 1899. So in 1916, I don't know if you can hear the pop-up messages, no, but my apologies. I think it came from my Messenger or Viber ata. But anyway, moving on. In 1916, by the way, okay. Again, it was the Constitution of the First Philippine Republic, the First Philippine Republic of 1889. Moving on, the 1935 Constitution. What is the importance of this Constitution, and why is this different from the any other Constitution? This class was promulgated and adopted under the U.S. Commonwealth, and it featured a political system virtually identical to the American one, and it became operative. In 1969, in 1916, if you can still remember from your history class, the US passed the Jones Act, which specified the independence and that would be granted only upon the formation of a stable democratic government modeled on the American model, not the French model as the previous constitution had been. The constitution before this one. The US approved a 10-year transition plan in 1934 and drafted a new constitution in 1935. In this system, or in this constitution, the system called for a president to be elected at large for how many terms? For a 4-year term, subject to one re-election, a bicameral Congress, and an independent judiciary. This constitution, it remained in force until 1972, when Ferdinand Marcos, utilizing one of its provisions, placed the entire country under martial law and made himself absolute ruler. 1973, no, I think this is one of the most controversial. Of course, the 1987 Constitution included among all the constitution that was made for the national government, for the entire state in general. 1973 Constitution, this was adopted during the martial law period when it was unanimously approved in pre-arranged community meetings. In 1965, if you can still remember, and I hope so, that you can still remember this as part of our history, Ferdinand Marcos was elected, no, and was re-elected in 1969. It was the first president to be so re-elected. Because Ferdinand Marcos was re-elected. Desirous of remaining in power beyond his legal tenure, he declared martial law in 1972, just before the end of his second and last term, citing a growing communist insurgency as its justification. He then manipulated an ongoing constitutional convention and caused the drafting of a new constitution in the 1973, this constitution, which allowed him to rule by decree until 1978, when the presidential system of the 1935 constitution was replaced with a parliamentary one. Under this new system class, Marcos held to power and continued to govern by decree, suppressing democratic institutions and restricting civil freedoms. In 1981, martial law was officially lifted, but Marcos, however, continued to rule by the expedient of being re-elected in a farce of an election to a new 6-year term. He continued to suppress dissent, and thousands of vocal objectors to his rule either mysteriously disappeared or were incarcerated. Despite economic decline, corruption allowed Marcos and his wife Imelda to live extravagantly, causing resentment domestically and criticism internationally. When opposition leader Benigno Aquino Jr., allow me to read my notes. This is part of my notes already. This was my notes during my stint as the student council president of the Ateneo de Davao University. Was assassinated upon returning from exile in 1983. Widespread outrage forced Marcos to hold snap elections. So there was a snap elections a year early. The election was marked by fraud on the part of Marcos and his supporters, but Marcos had himself declared the winner constitutionally amidst international condemnation and nationwide domestic protests. A small band of military rebels tried to mount a coup, which failed because of its discovery, but this triggered with what became internationally celebrated as the People Power Revolution, when drove of people spilled out into the streets to protect the rebels, eventually numbering well over a million, diba? Over a million of Filipinos. Under pressure from the United States, Marcos and his family fled into exile. His election opponent, Benigno Aquino Jr., Jr.'s widow, Corazon Aquino, Cory Aquino, no, the mother of our then President Benigno Aquino, was installed as president on February 25, 1986. I just want to emphasize, class, that we're not Dilawan here, we're not DDS here, and also not pro-Marcos here, because no amount of historical revisionism, to be honest, no amount of historical revisionism can make a dictator, a an, uh, an abusive dictator a hero. No, Marcos is not a hero, as simple as that. I'm sorry if there are Marcos supporters here, but history will tell us that he isn't a hero. Neither should be the Aquinos, diba? Moving on. 1987 Constitution. This constitution was the result of the overthrow of Marcos in 1987 and drafted under the presidency of the Marcos successor, Corazon Aquino. This established a representative democracy with power divided among three separate and independent branches of government: the executive, a bicameral legislature, and the judiciary. There was three independent na constitutional commissions: the Commission on Audit, the Civil Service Commission, and the Commission on Elections. Integrated into the Constitution was a full Bill of Rights, no, that the one that we have now, and of course, which guaranteed fundamental civil rights and political rights, and it provided for a free, fair, and periodic elections. Moving on, so the aforementioned war, where our the constitution that existed long time ago, sorry, naga-click siya, iyahan lang, no? Okay, I'm going to off the mouse. Three branches of government, the constitutions that we have long time ago and the one that we have now, the existing one, the 1987 constitution, but they are proposing for a wait lang. They're proposing for a change of consti and of course pushing for federalism, but we don't know. We don't know that the changes that we are about to have in the future. But for now, those are the existing the constitutions that have existed and the existing constitution, the 1987 constitution. So let's proceed to the three branches of government. What are these branches of government? As I have said earlier, as I have already said earlier, these are the executive department, the legislative department, and the judiciary department, the judiciary branch of the government. Legislative branch, what is the function of the legislature or the legislative branch of government? The legislative class is authorized to make laws, alter and repeal them through the power vested in the Philippine Congress. The Philippine Congress is composed of two houses, if you are familiar. One is the House of Representatives and one is the House of Senate. House of Representatives are composed of provincial representatives, our congressman, congresswomen, sorry, next, but anyway, congresswomen and congressmen from different provinces, and of course our mga mambabatas from our party list systems. To name a few, ano ba mga party list? Dumper party list, diba? Gabriela party list, Kabataan party list, etc., etc. This institution is divided into the Senate and the House of Representatives. Under Section 1 of the Legislative Department, Article 6, Section 1 of the Constitution, it says here that the legislative power shall be vested in the Congress of the Philippines, which shall consist of a House of Senate and a House of Representatives, except to the extent reserved to the people by the provision and initiative and referendum. So we take note that there was a mention of initiative and referendum here. What does this mean? Initiative class is the power of the people to propose amendments to the Constitution or to propose or enact legislation through an election for the purpose. Election called for the purpose. Referendum, on the other hand, it is the power of the electorate to approve or reject legislation through an election called for the purpose. As for the distinction, we will be discussing this in the next lessons that we're going to have. We have a long semester to go, so I hope we will be able to discuss that further in a live lecture. So plebiscite, take note, it involves the constituent of those citizens of the Philippines not otherwise disqualified by law who are 18 years of age or over and who shall have resided in the Philippines for at least 1 year and in place wherein they propose to vote or at least 6 months preceding the election. So this, if we're going to change our consti, we're going to shift from the kind of governance that we have right now to federalism, then we need to have a plebiscite. No, the government needs the confirmation of the people, whether it's a yes or a no. If you can remember, the Bangsamoro Organic Law or the Bangsamoro Basic Law, before it came to pass, I mean it was approved by, it was then approved to by the community that involved in the law itself. The Cotabato City, Maguindanao, etc., etc. Now that they have their own Bangsamoro na branch of the government or the BARM, autonomy region of Mindanao, di ba? Moving forward, there are actually a lot that I have to discuss for legislative branch, but I'm going to reserve some others to the next lessons. This is my own reviewer actually. I personally made this reviewer during my time in the constitutional law last year, second semester. But don't worry, I'm going to let you digest the cases that I have here. We're going to review some old cases. At the same time, we're going to discuss the current issues that involves our constitution, and of course, that involves the laws on mass media. Anyway, moving onwards, the next branch of government that we are going to discuss is the executive branch of government. The executive branch of government, it carries out laws, implementers, administrators of law. So the executive branch class, as we all know, is composed of the president, the vice president, who are elected by direct popular vote and serve a term of 6 years. The president that we have right now is President Rodrigo Duterte, and the vice president that we have at the moment is the Vice President Leni Robredo. The Constitution grants the president authority to appoint his cabinet. What are these cabinets? Of course, we have the Department of Education, Department of Health, DOH, DPWH, etc., etc. These departments from a large portion of the country's bureaucracy. Under Section 1 of Article 7 of the 1987 Constitution, it says here that the executive power shall be vested in the President of the Philippines. The powers of the President includes the executive power, the residual power, and any other powers that will be mentioned and will be discussed in the next succeeding slides. So to mention the qualifications of a president, first, he must be a natural-born citizen, natural-born Filipino citizen. He must be a registered voter. He must be able to read and write. He must at least be 40 years of age on the day of the election, and he must be a resident of the Philippines for at least 10 years immediately preceding such election. There is no requirement as to the degree earned, no? Wala bachelor's degree na requirement. Whether or not you are an elementary graduate, as long as you can read and as long as you can write, then you can become the president of the Philippines. I find it very ironic, no, for us to, I mean, dili man sa pagmataas, but as citizens, no, we deserve siguro higher standards when it comes to our public officials. Uh, there were lots of attempts siguro of kanang amendments to include kanang bachelor's degree na graduate sa katrabaho gani kailangan bachelor's degree, sa ato pa bang sariling presidente dili kailangan, ano, di ba? Kaya sa tinuod lang, if there is someone so popular na gusto mo dagan na kwartahan, and at the same time, ano man next man siya? And at the same time has the enough power to actually win, enough machinery to win, regardless if na siya degree or not, then he can be the next president. As long as kabalo lang siya mobasa o musulat. Next. And lastly, we have the judicial branch of the government. The judicial branch of government is tasked to evaluate laws. It holds the power to settle controversies involving rights that are legally, take note, that are legally demandable and legally enforceable. This branch determines whether or not there has been a grave abuse of discretion amounting to lack or excess of jurisdiction on the part of instrumentality of the government. It is made up of the Supreme Court and the lower courts. Under Section 1 of the Article 8 of the 1987 Constitution, it says here that judicial power shall be vested in one Supreme Court and in such lower courts as may be established by law. Judicial power includes the duty of the courts of justice to settle actual controversies involving rights which are legally demandable and enforceable, and to determine whether or not there has been a grave abuse of the discretion or amounting to lack or excess of jurisdiction on the part of any branch or instrumentality of the government. Yes, we have a lot of courts. Remember, we have the Court of Appeals, the regional trial courts, lower courts na siya, other than the Supreme Court. We have the Metropolitan Trial Court, Municipal Circuit Trial Courts, the Sandigan Bayan, Court of Tax Appeals, Sharia courts, no, the created by Presidential Decree 1083, and exclusive jurisdiction over cases involving offenses, Muslims or have been Muslim marriages, marriage, divorce recognized under the code, betrothal or breach of contrary to marry, and customary dowry, and etc. etc. Sharia district courts, we have all the other courts other than the Supreme Court. Okay. Moving on, please take note that each branch of government can change acts of other branches as follows. This is in relation to the doctrine of checks and balances. But it is of course, it is there are restrictions, but at the same time, these three branches coexist and can alter acts of the other branches, and this includes the following. The president can veto laws passed by the Congress. On the other hand, the Congress confirms or rejects the president's appointments and can remove the president from office in exceptional circumstances. Diba, at the moment, we have a proposal of appointment coming from the President Rodrigo Duterte himself, appointment sa Commission on Election. The Congress, the House of Representatives, and the House of Senate, for example, needs to check whether or not that appointee passed the qualifications for being a COMELEC na chairperson. We have justices of the Supreme Court who can overturn unconstitutional laws that are appointed by the President and confirmed by the Senate. If there are laws, at the moment we have the anti-terror law passed by our own legislature and of course confirmed, approved by the President. The courts, our Supreme Court has the duty and has the responsibility and has given the legal right to overturn laws that are unconstitutional. If these laws will be deemed to be unconstitutional and that violates the rights of the people, then our Supreme Court has the power to overturn the laws. Okay, for that's it for today. I hope that you were able to learn something from the constitutions and the branches of government that I was able to discuss for today. To-do list, the most exciting part of of every day of our every week lecture, digest the case. Again, I have already reminded you, I have already instructed you that for my class, for this class, we will be digesting cases from time to time. Low battery na daw ang laptop. We will be digesting cases from time to time, but worry not. I have already told you in our GC that I will be ano mag-next mag siya. Uy. That I will be limiting the cases that you will be digesting, because I understand that you're all graduating students. You're very busy with your thesis and in all the other major subjects, and dili na ako magdungag-dungag. But for the sake, of course, of delivering the quality of education, I am being paid here to teach you. And at the same time, we're also being, the government is also doing its part, no, of paying you, the scholars of the government, the SSE scholars, to comply and to learn. Ibalik sa bayan lahat. After this graduation, naghihintay ang bayan sa inyo. Digest the cases. I will be posting the cases right after this lecture, right after ma-post ng lecture. And of course, same as to the first batch of cases, deadline is next Friday on or before 10 a.m. So for those na wala pa nakapasa sa first set of cases, please do so. The deadline is 10 a.m. So I hope that you will comply your requirements, and I hope that you will cooperate. And class, I hope that you will not take this against me. At the same time, you will not see this as a bar siguro sa inyong yung mga laag bakaron, sa inyong akads bakaron, or sa inyong trabaho bakaron. Because in one way or another, this should also help you in the future, in your practice as a future development communication practitioner. So that's it for today. Thank you very much for listening. And for questions, clarifications, you can comment down below. You can reach out to your BIDL, si Sean, for kanang exceptional na concerns. And you can also message me via Messenger if there are really emergency cases, and at the same time, if it's not past work hours. Once again, thank you, and have a great weekend. Stop sharing and stop recording. Thank you, class, and have a great day ahead.